Chapter 61, Early Winter Daily Life, Part 2. I think there might be some misunderstanding. Natasha's voice came from the other end of the phone. No, you don't need to explain. Besides, SHIELD actually has health insurance for family members. I've said before, our benefits are quite good. I didn't... Wait, you mean there's money to be made? 30% of the amount Nick reported? That's so high? Captain America's bonus was only 18%. Oh, yes. Thank you for your comfort. She's all right, Natasha said on the other end of the phone. I heard Stark wants to hire some neuroscience experts to further modify his Jaeger. I hope you can remind him that even if Colonel Rhodes resigns, the military will definitely not give up. Even without the Air Force, there's still the Army and Navy. This trouble is far from over. Schiller said, I understand. I believe Stark can handle these things on his own now. Indeed, Schiller was right. Stark does have to handle these things on his own, and what's more troublesome is that he now has to learn to take care of himself. Previously, Obadiah managed the vast majority of Stark's weapons manufacturing and military industry departments. But now, due to severe injuries and advanced age, Obadiah is still unconscious and has not yet woken up. Pepper is going crazy with work. She wishes she could split herself into 8 people. Originally, Pepper was just Stark's personal secretary. Even when she helped him manage the company, she was only responsible for some personnel and procurement matters. But now that Obadiah is bedridden, Pepper has begun to take over the entire Stark Industries group, and she no longer has any time to care about Stark's personal life. As we all know, Stark has virtually no self-care ability. Originally, he had Rhodes, his good friend, to stay with, but now Rhodes has gone on vacation. No matter how intelligent Jarvis is, he is just an electronic life form and cannot take care of Stark in every way. Schiller and Stark stared at each other through the clinic door. Stark patted the door and said, Let me in. It's still daytime. Aren't you open here? You didn't make an appointment, so of course we won't open. What the hell? Why can they all come and go whenever they want? But I can't. You said it yourself, they could leave at any time, so how long do you plan to stay here? Don't tell me it's a month. It won't take that long. It mainly depends on how long Pepper is busy. I guess with her intelligence, she'll be able to take over the entire Stark Industries group in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks? I suggest you switch to SHIELD. Hey, you know I don't want to go there. There are 2 of Howard's old comrades there. Stark bent 2 fingers and made a quotation mark gesture. I can't stand having a tea party every day, reminiscing about their World War II days and stuff. As Stark was about to push the door open, Schiller held it shut on the other side. He said, Listen, I'm touched that you stayed up all night researching neurology data for me, but that doesn't mean you can stay here for a month. If that Spider-Boy can do it, why can't I? Schiller took a deep breath and opened his mouth. Stark stared at him from outside the door. He wasn't wearing his armor, and the wind was blowing hard outside, so he had to frantically press his scarf down. Well, it does look a bit pitiful. Schiller hesitated for a moment, and Stark pushed open the door and squeezed in. After entering, he patted his coat, looked the house up and down, and said, This house of yours is truly the most mismatched in terms of structure and function I have ever seen. Schiller immediately regretted it, but what he regretted even more was yet to come. Iron Man is indeed a very loyal friend. If he only appears in front of you once a month, you would think he is the best friend in the world. Smart, rich, and loyal. But when he's in front of you every day for a month, you'll just think of him as a piece of dog shit. Stark is a typical example of someone who can only be admired from afar. Soon, Schiller realized how wise it was that Rhodes had packed his bags so quickly and gone on a trip to Antarctica. He must have anticipated the current situation before leaving New York without stopping. The next morning, Schiller heard noises downstairs before he even got out of bed. Stark grinned and walked around the refrigerator, but as he turned around, the cuff of his sweater brushed against the edge of the dining table. He cursed under his breath, pulled the sleeve out with 2 fingers, and quickly ran upstairs to change. As he came down, he kept muttering, Damn it! I feel like the air here is full of oil. Why can't you clean this place properly? God, the dust on these handrails hasn't been cleaned in 10 years, and those picture frames are breeding grounds for bacteria. Oh, the kettle, and this kettle. Did you know that the steam it emits may carry various bacteria that are bad for your respiratory system? Damn it! Don't come any closer. You rat. I'm allergic to fur. Get out of here. Has it been vaccinated? Could it be carrying some kind of plague? Stark shuddered to himself. After breakfast, Stark leaned back on the sofa in the living room and said into the phone, "Oh yes, yes. Sweetheart, I'm not that free lately. Magazine cover? You'll have to ask that bald editor-in-chief. You know, I'm busy in Hollywood too. Olivia? No, she's not as pretty as you. Of course. I bet no one at that fashion show will be sexier than you." Schiller, who was writing his paper by the window, couldn't take it anymore and hit Stark on the back of the head with a ballpoint pen. Stark yelled, "Ouch!" and turned around to look at Schiller in shock. After a while, Peter arrived, and the two started playing games together again. When these two people meet, it truly illustrates what it means to stay up all night and not get up in the morning. When Stark was in the lab, he basically worked day and night. He would start his experiments at 6 or 7 in the evening and continue until 8 or 9 in the morning, and then sleep until the afternoon. According to him, the evening was when he was most inspired. Peter used to stay up all night, but because his house was being renovated, he stayed with Schiller for a while. Schiller had a very healthy lifestyle, going to bed early and waking up early every day. Not wanting to cause trouble for the doctor, Peter also tried his best to adjust his schedule, and now he usually goes to bed around midnight. Pikachu, despite being a yellow-haired mouse, is actually a nocturnal creature, most active between 3 and 4 a.m. So when Stark arrived, the 3.5 people in the house were living on different biological clocks. The intense conflict over their schedules threw the house into chaos. Just as Schiller was getting ready for bed, Stark woke up. While Stark and Peter were engrossed in a game, Peter got sleepy. By the time Stark and Pikachu had played until dawn and Stark was exhausted and ready to go to sleep, Schiller had already woken up. Not to mention there are 2 superheroes here who fly around New York all the time. Iron Man usually saves the world during the day, which means sacrificing his daytime sleep. So, he will occasionally jump up like a zombie to save the world when Pikachu is sound asleep between 10 and 11 a.m., and Pikachu almost peed in Stark's water cup because of this. Peter's good neighbor Spider-Man likes to go out at night, which also means sacrificing his sleep time. Usually, it's in the early morning when Schiller is sound asleep. As a result, Peter is often hit on the back of the head by flying pens and teacups every time he goes out or comes back. Steve and Stark, who would occasionally drop by, had an irreconcilable conflict. Every time Steve passed by on his morning run, Stark was still awake. The sleepy Iron Man couldn't argue with Captain America, so he got so angry that he wouldn't sleep and would put on his Iron Man suit to duel with Steve. When the two finished fighting and parted ways, it was basically noon. That's right, Peter, who had stayed up until midnight, got up again. Natasha stood at the clinic entrance, puzzled, and asked Schiller, "Aside from your pet, there should be 3 people living here, but why do I only ever see one of them?" "The statistics department colleagues have given up on giving you a schedule of events. Every time I come here to find someone, it's like entering a lottery." Schiller was also angry. He said, "This is my house, so of course their schedules should follow mine. In fact, my schedule is the healthiest. I go to bed at 8 o'clock at night and get up at 5 in the morning. Is there a more regular schedule than that?" Stark was equally self-righteous, saying, "No great scientist would work through the night without doing experiments. Nighttime is the best time God has given mankind to unleash their genius brains. Please, the inventions I make at night can change the world. Why would I need to switch?" Peter also complained, "These days, where are the good kids who go to bed at 9 o'clock at night? All my classmates are like that, and there are so many new games coming out lately. You should ask the game developers why they're releasing all the good games this month." Pikachu has an even stronger point. "I'm just a mouse. You actually expect a mouse to adjust its sleep schedule like a human?" The symbiote was also aggrieved. It said in Schiller's mind, "Their brains always smell especially good in the middle of the night. They smell so delicious." Finally, one night, Schiller was asleep until the early hours of the morning when the symbiote in his brain was frantically swallowing. Just as Schiller was awakened, Stark burst into the room excitedly, shouting, "I know what this is all about. Look here. What do you think of this structure? As neurons in nanoneurons. I'm a genius. This will definitely work." The next morning, Pepper picked up Stark, who had been thrown out of the psychiatric clinic along with his luggage, looking completely bewildered. "I'd like to recommend a book called Flying on a Sword. I accidentally bumped into a witch. You can click below to jump to the book quickly. I don't usually recommend books based on the plot, but this one is really too late. It will be available tomorrow at noon, so I'm making an exception and recommending it. If you're interested, you can check it out. This book truly demonstrates that nurturing a book can actually kill it." It had been at the top of the light novel category's new book chart for a long time, so it definitely had substance. I even thought it would be available on the Sanjiang platform in the first round of releases. But because there were so many people nurturing it, it missed out on being released directly on Sanjiang. It's really tragic. Please, everyone, don't wait for a new book to be published during its initial release period. It's free anyway, and it won't take long to finish it. Following the author is so important. Chapter 62, Early Winter Daily Life, Part 2. As social animals, humans are always inclined to conform. The environment in which a group is situated will inevitably change them, and Stark is now experiencing this firsthand. Peter and his childhood sweetheart Gwen are inseparable every day. After Gwen officially confirmed their relationship with Peter some time ago, the two of them started dating 2 or 3 times a week. Spider-Man, who hasn't even reached the stage of meeting his future father-in-law yet, is practically bubbling with happiness lately. Every day, you can hear him excitedly talking about the little gifts he received from his girlfriend, or which restaurant he ate at and which dish was particularly delicious. Stark had to admit that even though the details Peter described were childish, and the restaurants they went to for their dates were roadside stalls that a billionaire like Stark would never go to, Stark could still feel Peter's joy every time he heard his descriptions. Besides Peter, through the sharp tongue of the clever little rascal Skrank, the story of Schiller and his wife, after being swayed by numerous opinions, became increasingly rich in detail and began to become more and more poignant. Originally, it was just information that Coulson obtained during his routine investigation of Strange. But how could he keep such a big piece of gossip to himself? The next day, Natasha and Nick heard a very real and detailed version from Coulson. Strange's few words were embellished into a story by the brilliant Agent Coulson. When this story reached Natasha and Nick's ears, Natasha, being a woman, was very interested in this kind of romantic love story. Her uniquely feminine sensibility led her to add more romantic details to the story, making it seem more real. Nick, being a skeptic, would inevitably investigate once he learned of this fact. This investigation actually yielded some clues for him. He discovered that the medical fees paid by S.H.I.E.L.D. and Stark to Schiller were originally just sitting in one of Schiller's American accounts, but recently, this large sum of money was transferred to an international account in Switzerland. After that, Nick couldn't find out where the money went. He guessed that the money might have been used by Schiller to keep his wife alive. Some time ago, Schiller told everyone that he was going to leave for a while. In fact, Nick had been trying to track him down since then, but the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents cast a wide net and still couldn't find any trace of him. Nick thought that Schiller might have used his magical abilities to go to his wife's place. Nick always believed that to be a good secret agent, in addition to meticulous logical thinking, one also needs the ability to make connections and think outside the box. Often, a sudden flash of inspiration can bring unexpected changes to an operation. Therefore, with all these factors combined, Nick was certain that the matter was almost certainly true. He believes that Schiller's wife may not have been American, because he could not find such a missing woman in the records. Schiller may have met her while traveling, and after they fell in love and got married, his wife may have contracted a disease that was temporarily incurable, but would continue to worsen. Combining this with the cryogenic technology that Schiller mentioned to Strange earlier, Nick speculates that Schiller may have mastered a technology that could freeze people permanently to preserve his wife, prevent the disease from worsening, and have been searching for a cure. Nick saw more than just a tragic love story in this tale. He had always wanted to win Schiller over to S.H.I.E.L.D. and get him to work for them. If S.H.I.E.L.D. could make a difference in treating his wife, Nick believed that S.H.I.E.L.D. would soon have another powerful ally. Therefore, Nick also obtained information on various neurology experts, intending to see who was qualified to solve this problem. If Schiller heard Nick's inner thoughts and knew the story he had imagined, he would definitely applaud this king of spies. Isn't this just the love story of Mr. Freeze and his wife? The story of Mr. Freeze is great. It could be mine in a second. When the story reached Stark's ears, he naturally assumed that Nick must have solid evidence, and thus he concluded that Schiller had indeed been searching for a cure for many years because of his wife. This fact was quite shocking to Stark. After all, most of the people he had met along the way were just like his father, debauched and dissolute. But the more fatal blow came from Captain America, Steve Rogers. A few days ago, Stark noticed that Steve had stopped going for his morning run, so he went to ask Schiller what was wrong. Schiller said that Steve had been in a bad mood lately. Stark was overjoyed. Captain America was in a bad mood, but Iron Man was in a good mood. When Steve returned, Stark wanted to mock him mercilessly, but Steve looked extremely haggard. Schiller looked serious and sad, and Peter barely dared to breathe. In the days since Pepper left, Stark has been wandering around, and he has finally become a little more perceptive. Seeing everyone like this, he swallowed back all the words he had to say. Afterwards, he went to Schiller to ask what had happened to Steve. But Schiller just shook his head and told him to ask Steve himself. How could Iron Man possibly ask Captain America on his own initiative? However, Stark's excessive curiosity eventually led him to approach Steve. Then he learned from Steve about his romantic love story with Peggy that spanned a century. A weak and helpless recruit who has just entered the army camp meets a heroic and caring female officer. After this recruit becomes the famous Captain America, they go through life and death together and become each other's perfect soulmates. Even a century later, Captain America remains steadfast that only Peggy is his perfect dance partner. But the ending of this romantic story is tragic. A few days ago, Steve met Peggy, who was lying in a hospital bed and was very old. He learned from the doctor that she probably didn't have long to live. He saw the photo of him that Peggy had kept. It wasn't the strong Captain America after the serum injection, but the timid and weak Steve who had just entered boot camp and was bullied everywhere. After being transformed into Captain America, Steve hadn't cried so hard that he almost fainted in a long time. He was truly on the verge of a breakdown. He even irrationally rushed to Nick's office to ask if there was any special serum that could keep Peggy alive. Unfortunately, in the end, Steve could only accept this ending with immense pain and helplessness. This story had a greater impact on Stark because, according to Steve, his father Howard was involved in the whole story, and he and Peggy were once friends. This made Stark wonder if he was being a bit too unconventional. When it comes to women, Stark certainly doesn't lack them. From magazine models and party girls to Hollywood actresses, Stark changes them every day, sometimes even several. But when it comes to dating, to true love, Stark thought for a moment and found his mind blank. From childhood to adulthood, he has never had a romantic relationship that he can be proud of or that resonates with his friends. First love? I seem to have a vague memory of it. Stark tried hard to think, but he had to admit that he had almost forgotten it. Peter and Gwen are deeply in love, Schiller and his wife are separated by death, and Captain America and Peggy are never born. Stark, surrounded by this group of people, couldn't help but use his genius brain to think hard about why he was different. Pepper has been looking at me strangely lately. In the S.H.I.E.L.D. cafeteria, Stark, Schiller, and Peter were eating at a table. After Schiller threw Stark out, Pepper had no choice but to place him in S.H.I.E.L.D. He was very unwilling, but if he didn't go, he would have to sleep on the streets. Strange? In what way is it strange? I'm not kidding. I'm serious. I can't describe the look in her eyes. There was a hint of worry, a hint of relief, but also a hint of sympathy. I really should hand this job over to you. You can read so much from someone's eyes. Stark waved his hand dismissively and said, Come on, I've met hundreds, if not thousands of women. I can tell what they're thinking just by looking into their eyes. Tell me, what's wrong with Pepper? That depends on what's been going on with you lately. Has anything been going on with you? What's wrong with me? I'm perfectly fine. Schiller put down his fork, snapped his fingers, and said, Jarvis, can you analyze what's different about your master's recent behavior? Jarvis beeped twice, and Stark rested his chin on his hand, waiting for his smart assistant to reply. According to our analysis, you've turned down 18 invitations from the opposite sex in the past week, which is the only difference from your usual behavior. In an instant, Stark saw an expression on Schiller's face that was almost identical to Pepper's. Damn it, I'm not. You don't need to explain, if you've figured it out, then congratulations. If you're just powerless. Schiller shrugged and said, Well, you can only say they deserve it. Schiller knew that, in the comics, this guy was a super-womanizer. Not to mention his first love Meredith, who was forced to break up with him, and Bane, who had ulterior motives, Gamora, Captain Marvel, Wasp, Spider-Woman, and She-Hulk were all women he seduced, slept with, and then ran away with. I'm not. Stark put down his cutlery, placed his hands on the table, and said, I just don't think they're any good either. Who was it that kept talking about a yacht full of beautiful women back then? Okay. Stark said like a deflated balloon. I've never had a proper relationship. You guys are always talking to me about love, romance, and all those romantic stories. I used to think they were everything. Sexy, glamorous, fleeting, and passionate. What's wrong with that? But Peter said yesterday that his girlfriend was willing to listen to him talk about how he built those machines, and the two of them actually talked about it for the whole afternoon. Actually, we hadn't talked enough yet. The next day, we went to the exhibition hall again, the one with Stark Industries. The machines there were amazing. We walked around all day without feeling tired, With Stark's murderous gaze upon him, Peter silently stuffed his mouth full of sandwiches. Okay, nobody wants to listen to me talk about these things. They'd rather hear about Hollywood gossip, designer fashion shows, and new winter and spring clothes. Why would anyone want to hear me talk about how to build mechs? But you really want to talk about these things, right? In your opinion, mechs are much better looking than those designer coats. Stark pouted. He looked exactly like a lemon. But it's no use you coming to us to talk about this. You have to go to Pepper. But she doesn't understand these mechs, and she's already very busy. Like I said, as long as you speak, she will definitely be willing to listen. Chapter 63, The Little Spider Who's Good at Making Friends. You've already gotten your learner's license? Does that mean we can drive my dad's car to the beach soon? In a small cafe next to the shopping street in Midtown, Gwen was slowly stirring her coffee with a spoon. Peter, sitting across from her, said, "My uncle doesn't have much time. He was found to have a shadow on his lung at the hospital. But it's okay, just a minor inflammation. You know, he used to smoke when he was younger. Of course, that's how their generation was. My dad was too. My mom would argue with him every time his coat smelled of smoke. Although I got my learner's license, my uncle doesn't have time. No one is with me and I can't drive alone. I've never driven a car before," Peter said with a shrug. "Actually, I'm not very good at driving. The learner's license only requires a written test. I can barely start the car now, but as for how to drive it..." Peter shook his head. "I don't know when I'll pass my road test. I hardly ever even ride in a car, let alone drive one." The Parker family only had one old pickup truck that Uncle Ben used to commute to and from get off work. When Peter interned at Stark Industries, he swung between the high-rise buildings on his own using spider silk. In the United States, people Peter's age usually get a learner's license, which only requires a written test. However, to drive on the road alone, he must pass a road test. Peter has basically never driven a car before. Even if he is a genius, he cannot create something out of nothing, and passing the road test is a distant dream. Gwen sensed the disappointment in Peter's tone, so she changed the subject. "I heard that Stark Industries gave you a substantial internship fee, and even plans to have you work for them in the future?" "Yes, although I told my uncle and aunt that they would cover my future college tuition. They were obviously scared off by the expensive tuition fees of some good universities. They want to save all their money in case of any unexpected situation. I think it's good this way. Sometimes I think they're worrying unnecessarily, but when disasters actually happen, I realize their concerns aren't entirely unfounded," Gwen said. Her gentleness and understanding always made Peter feel somewhat unworthy of her. "If your uncle can't accompany you to driving practice, does he not have any friends? Or do you have any other elders who are available?" Peter thought for a moment and said, "You reminded me, I do have a few candidates." The next day, in the living room of the psychologist's clinic, Peter said, "That's just how it is. I have to drive a car before I can pass my road test." Schiller paused for a moment, then thought it wasn't a big deal. With Peter's genius, he figured he could just drive him around and he'd learn everything. So he said, "No problem. I'd be happy to help. I'll drive you around first and you can watch from the side. Then it'll be your turn to do it yourself. You'll learn it all in less than an afternoon." Several tens of minutes later, Schiller, in the driver's seat, pulled out a small booklet from somewhere, and while adjusting the steering wheel, looked at the booklet and said, "Let me see the part about turning and changing lanes. Oh, here it is. Wait, this rule is too strange, isn't it?" Pikachu and Peter sat in the passenger seat, staring at each other. Pikachu said, "I bet he never even read the New York driver's handbook before he got his driver's license." "Isn't that obvious?" Peter said. "Then why don't you think about how he passed his driver's license test in the first place?" Peter stared stiffly ahead and said, "As long as I don't think about this problem, I'll feel safe for the time being." Within minutes, Peter and Schiller were standing beside the car, shivering in the cold wind of early winter in New York. Schiller, holding the phone, said, "Hello? Is this the insurance company?" "Yes. I've already sent you the location information." "Oh, it's not serious, just a minor side scratch." Then he covered the receiver and shouted at the driver of the white Audi next to him, "Shut up! This is all your fault. Haven't you read the New York driver's handbook? I was going straight, you can't." 20 minutes later, a flashy red supercar pulled up beside the accident scene. Stark, wearing sunglasses, waved to Peter and said, "Come on, your Uncle Tony will take you to see the New York coastline." As he spoke, He let out a disdainful nasal sound and said, "You should have come to me in the first place. Look at this doctor, he doesn't look like a real race car driver at all. I bet he's never driven a car at 100 miles per hour in his entire life." Peter glanced back at Schiller, who was on the phone with the insurance company. Then, still clutching Pikachu, got into Stark's sports car. Before long, Pikachu covered its ears tightly and yelled at Peter in the wind. "Why is he speeding? Without closing the roof." "How should I know?" Peter shouted back. "This is called Fast and Furious. Do you understand?" Stark shouted along. A few minutes later, the sports car pulled up to the side of the road. Stark pulled out a booklet from somewhere and, while looking at it, said, "Damn it. How do I close the top? I've almost never driven a car by hand." No, Jarvis. I don't need your help. Let me see. Oh, here it is. What? A vehicle intelligent management system. Why is it all intelligent again? I want to drive manually. Is this a tutorial? Isn't there even a button or something? 20 minutes later, Steve picked up Peter by the roadside. Peter's hair was a mess from the wind. Pikachu tugged at his tangled fur and said, "I shouldn't have believed your nonsense about going for a drive. I'm just a mouse. I don't need to learn to drive. Why did I come out with you?" Peter comforted him, saying, "It's okay. Captain America won't be as unreliable as them." Indeed, Steve drove an unremarkable black Cadillac. After Peter got in, Steve started the car with practiced ease. At least he didn't pull out a pamphlet to read while driving. Peter breathed a sigh of relief, but soon his smile vanished. Steve's speed increased rapidly, and he didn't slow down when turning. Every time he drifted, the tires left charred marks on the ground, and Peter would be slammed hard against the other side of the car door. Pikachu, which he was holding, almost flew out of the car window. Then, when going over the speed bump, Steve showed no intention of slowing down at all. To Peter and Pikachu's horror, the car went straight over it. When the front wheels hit the speed bump, the car bounced violently, and the front of the car lifted up. Steve, still oblivious, drove the car almost airborne over the speed bump. Peter was thrown from his seat, his head slamming into the roof. As he landed, his back was hit by the seat again, and he screamed, "Ouch! My back!" Pikachu has now been slapped onto the windshield. Steve continued driving, oblivious to Peter's horrific state. He chuckled and said, "This vehicle's suspension system is quite advanced. Back when I was driving on the battlefield, my legs and arms would get bruises after less than 20 kilometers. Learning to drive always involves this process. Speed bumps on the road are much better than spike traps and ramming barriers on the battlefield. Right?" 20 minutes later, Coulson picked up Steve and Peter in a shield car. Steve complained, "I take back what I said about this car. Its quality is terrible. How could it stall like that?" Coulson said, "Captain, even if you're Captain America, you can't drive without a license and speed on a main road in New York. Damn it. Driving without a license. How could I not have a driver's license? Driver's licenses issued before 1940 do not count." Steve pursed his lips and said, "Okay, but at least I wasn't speeding. Traffic regulations from before 1940 don't count either." Pikachu sat on Peter's lap with a look of utter despair and said, "You really know how to make friends." Peter, equally despondent, said, "I thought there would always be someone reliable." "That's just what you think." Coulson turned to him and asked, "So you want to get a driver's license? Why didn't you call us to ask? SHIELD can bypass the Department of Motor Vehicles and issue you a full driver's license directly. We have that kind of authority." Peter said, "If you had told me this before today, I would have been overjoyed to have you print out a full driver's license for me right away. But now I've learned my lesson, so I'll practice on my own. Before I drive on the road, I will definitely memorize the driver's manual and vehicle manual, and then update my driver's license information on time every year." Coulson seemed quite surprised. He looked at Peter with admiration and said, "There aren't many young people like you who are upright and don't seek privileges." Peter said wearily, "That's probably because I'm really good at making friends." Next Wednesday, Zhejiang, available now on sale. Chapter 64, The Little Spider's Great Adventure, Part 1. Ultimately, the people actually in charge of teaching Peter to drive were Matt and his girlfriend Erica. Matt's serious injury last time helped him and Erica resolve their differences and reconcile. Of course, after breaking free from the brainwashing of the Hands and the society, Erica also realized that she had acted impulsively back then, and that Peter wanted to protect Matt. She felt somewhat sorry for stabbing Peter back then, so when she learned from Matt about Peter's rather unsuccessful driving lessons, she and Matt took the initiative to help Peter practice driving. To be fair, Erica is definitely more reliable than the others. Although she is also a female ninja assassin, she is quite patient when it comes to teaching. That day, Peter was trying to drive himself, while Erica and Matt sat in the car, talking about Kingpin. "I'll teach him a lesson one day," Peter said. "He actually used such despicable means to deal with you. Don't be impulsive. My feud with Kingpin is complicated, and he's the most famous mob boss in America. You can't handle him right now. What about that Bullseye guy? I remember he's still in Hell's Kitchen, right? I'm going to beat him up tonight," Peter said. Erica said, "The situation is not good now. After Kingpin learned about the Dragon Bone, he did not immediately target the hand. They seem to have reached some kind of agreement. Worst of all, Kingpin may have hired the hand. That doesn't make sense. The hand would care so much about the keel. If they knew Kingpin also wanted the keel, they would definitely turn against them in the final stages. Doesn't Kingpin know that? That's the worst part. Even though Kingpin knew the hand would never truly cooperate with him, let alone hand over the Dragon Bone, he was still willing to hire them. This means there must be something we don't know that makes Kingpin hire them even at the risk of the hand potentially turning against him. Has he had any big business deals lately?" Erica said with a serious expression. "If I had to bring it up, you should know about his drug business." "You mean the plan he abandoned before? What are you talking about?" Peter was on the steering wheel. He couldn't understand the cryptic conversation between Matt and Erica. At this point in time, Spider-Man hadn't faced Kingpin yet. Daredevil Matt was the one mainly fighting Kingpin. Kingpin's drug business on the East Coast has reached a bottleneck. He has already seized the vast majority of the market, but he is not satisfied. I once received intelligence that Kingpin wanted to target younger students, using the people he had gathered in various universities and high schools to sell potentially addictive drugs to younger children, so that one day he could break his historical sales record. Peter slammed his fist on the steering wheel, muttered a curse under his breath, and then said, "Ever since the day I started wanting to be a hero, there have been people constantly pushing the boundaries of my understanding. Why don't they have any humanity at all? You'll see many more monsters like this in the future," Matt said. The calmness in his tone gave Peter a sense of strength. The car drove from the main road onto a street. It was getting late, so Peter wanted to drive Matt's car back first and continue practicing the next day. Just as they turned the corner, a bright light flashed by. Peter instinctively touched his eyes, and then, with a spider sense, he immediately opened the car door and jumped out. With a bang, several darts pierced the windshield and hit the driver's seat and the passenger seat. Peter looked up and saw several dark figures leap down from the nearby high-rise buildings, accompanied by a cloud of black smoke, and approached the car in a few flashes. After a period of training, Peter was no longer a complete naivete. He first rolled on the spot to dodge a row of darts, then leaped with all his might and knocked a ninja who had landed on the roof of the car off. He was very strong. The ninja turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared in an instant. Then, another ninja pulled open the car door, but there was nothing inside. A dagger flashed coldly, and Erica appeared on the side of the car. She killed one ninja first, and with a backhand swing, several shurikens scared away another. Matt wasn't in the car either. His senses were far beyond those of ordinary people. He heard the noise while the dart was still in flight. He took down a ninja at the back of the car, walked over with his cane and said, "These guys are really troublesome. Last time we only managed to take one down, and this time they all got away." Peter shook his slightly numb wrist and asked, "What happened? Have they attacked you recently?" "Erica and I moved because our old house was constantly bothered by these fleas." Peter said, "I'm sorry. I've been a bit busy lately and haven't been able to visit you. If I had known you were in trouble, I should have gone over. It's best if you don't come. These people can't be dealt with by brute force. Even if Erica and I wanted to take one down, we would have to set a trap. In this kind of skirmish, they would just disappear. You can't handle the ninja's escape techniques. You'll need a special escape method to break them." Erica, also carrying a dagger, got back into the car. "Should we still drive? What if they come again? Didn't you notice? They're not here to kill us. They're just here to harass us." Peter got into the car too, this time with Erica driving. Peter said, "Then what's the point of them doing this? It doesn't hurt you. While we are not afraid of them, my neighbors are not necessarily. They know that in order to protect ordinary people, I have to move frequently, which will greatly interfere with my ability to go out and crack down on their businesses. Erica continued Matt's words. This is a common tactic used by the Hands. Whoever opposes them, they send these immortal ninjas to harass them relentlessly until they completely leave the area. These ninjas are not very powerful, do not kill often, and are elusive, leaving no evidence. Therefore, the local authorities have almost no reason to take action against them. That's precisely Kingpin's brilliance. He used these ninjas from the Handway Society to harass me, preventing me from hindering his industrial upgrading. He knew that even if he went all out, he wouldn't be able to kill me in a short time and would only face a more intense retaliation. But this fly-like harassment could greatly slow down my progress. Erica said as she turned the steering wheel, perhaps this is one of the reasons why he chose to cooperate with the Hand. Your previous actions caused him too much damage. Even though Bullseye almost succeeded, you reappeared not long after and even took down several of his underground casinos faster. He already knows that instead of hiring assassins to kill you and always failing, sending people to harass you constantly is a better option. Matt sighed. He was somewhat helpless about the current situation. These ninjas are annoying. They can lower your heart rate so Matt can't pinpoint their location for a while. They come to his house every few days, either throwing darts or setting fires, causing a lot of trouble. The landlord doesn't care if Matt is being harassed. He just kicks them out. Matt, a lawyer, originally had a nice apartment in Manhattan. His little shack in Hell's Kitchen was just a base, but the ninjas kept coming to cause trouble, forcing him to move repeatedly, which really took a lot of his energy. Daredevil's day only has 24 hours. He used to sacrifice sleep to fight crime, but now he has to write lawsuits and attend court hearings during the day, and move and organize things at night. He can only go out for a short while in the middle of the night. Not only has his efficiency dropped significantly, but his energy is also somewhat depleted. Kingpin cleverly exploited Daredevil's weakness. Matt is still a socialite, and when faced with such trouble, he would inevitably spend a lot of time maintaining his social status. Erica herself has a lot of troubles. The Hand is ruthless towards traitors, and she hasn't returned to report for too long, so Kingpin has become suspicious. Bullseye keeps looking for opportunities to kill her and take back his position. Peter said, although I can't help you deal with these ninjas, at least I can go and cause trouble for that target first. You have to be careful, Erica said. Bullseye isn't an ordinary person either. He's a master acrobat, very skilled in physical combat, and very cunning. That's perfect. I haven't faced any decent opponents yet. Did that billionaire Stark make you a suit of armor? To deal with Bullseye, you'd better wear it at all times. He's very good with hidden weapons, but if his hidden weapons can't penetrate your suit, then you'll be much easier to deal with. The suit is still being tested. I received a call from Mr. Stark yesterday, asking me to come to the building. It should be completed within a few days. As they spoke, the car drove to a street near Matt's residence. Several people got out of the car, and Matt said, you'd better think it through. Once you make a move against Bullseye, you'll inevitably come into Kingpin's line of sight. The fight against Kingpin is a real life-or-death struggle, not something you can compare to beating up a few robbers or thieves in Hell's Kitchen. He will use any cruel means you can or cannot imagine to kill you. He may become your lifelong nightmare. No matter where you go, you will have to be on guard against his assassination at all times, just like I was. Peter stood on the other side of the car, looking at Matt. The streetlights were all off, and only the car windows faintly reflected the lights from the apartment buildings. Peter asked him, do you regret it? When you were lying on the operating room bed, did you regret getting involved in all of this? If I hadn't gotten involved in all of this, I'd probably be in a luxury apartment downtown right now, preparing for my case that's going to court the next day. Maybe I'd be thinking about when to discuss getting engaged with my girlfriend, or maybe I'd even be considering getting a dog, Erica said. But now you're like a rat in the street. Forget about keeping a dog. Even if you kept a tropical fish, its corpse would be on your bedroom door the next day. When I chose to get involved in these things, I didn't think it through at all. What do you think? That I thought about it for a year before I even started. In fact, I plunged headlong into this bottomless abyss with a heart full of hatred and passion, Matt said. Although I really hope you become a superhero, because with your abilities you can save many people, which is why I'm willing to teach you. But I'm not trying to lie to you. I have to remind you that going against Kingpin means there's no turning back. You must be both righteous and powerful. If you lack either, you will only face death. Chapter 65 The Little Spider's Great Adventure. Part 2. Peter's operation targeting the bullseye did not go smoothly. The first problem he encountered was that he could not find where the bullseye was. The reality is that Hell's Kitchen has a large transient population, and even if he were Spider-Man, he couldn't possibly check the entire population of Hell's Kitchen in such a short time. As Erica said, Bullseye is very cunning. He knows he has many enemies, so his whereabouts are unpredictable. Peter spotted him at the entrance of a nightclub, and the next day he disappeared. With so many buildings and gangs in Hell's Kitchen, it would be very difficult for Peter to find Bullseye's hideout. Peter then understood just how much effort Matt had put in to always find the right targets when attacking Kingpin's businesses. Peter felt somewhat frustrated. In the past, he had frequented Hell's Kitchen and would occasionally fight off robbers or thieves on the outskirts of the area, and had even beaten up 2 armed drug dealers. However, organized crime and lone wolves are 2 completely different concepts. The reason why some gangs are difficult to deal with and some criminal organizations are difficult to eradicate is because their influence in the local area is deeply entrenched, and everyone is their eyes and ears. This has caused great difficulties for Peter's investigation. Obviously, Bullseye has become aware of the situation. But Peter will not give up. He was smart and realized where his strengths lay. After wandering around Hell's Kitchen aimlessly like a headless fly without any results, Peter began to seek help from modern technology. One day at noon, Schiller watched as Peter slammed a huge box onto the table with a bang. Upon opening it, inside was a strangely shaped computer. The computer and the box were one piece, the keyboard was oddly shaped, there was no mouse, and it was connected to a bunch of complicated wires and antennas. Peter kept fiddling with the screen, the blue light reflecting off his face. Pikachu stood by watching. He said, "You want to check cell phone signals? To eavesdrop on communications in Hell's Kitchen." That's right. People here definitely don't have any awareness of network and signal encryption. I got a bunch of junk from a classmate's dad and put it together in a simple way. It's not very reliable, but it's enough. But with so many cell phones and network signals, even if you intercept and crack them all, you still have to find out which one is the bullseye one by one. This is what I'm doing. In fact, I've already tested listening to signals and it's not difficult. I'm now writing a program to intelligently capture communication content. Schiller, arms crossed, looked at the 2 of them and said, "So when did you 2 plan to get together?" Pikachu, while eating a jar of peanut butter, said, "Don't forget, I'm a detective. This kid hired me. That's right. I need someone to help me. I need someone to stay behind the scenes and keep an eye on things. I'm truly grateful that you chose a mouse over me," Schiller said. "Oh, don't misunderstand, Doctor," Peter said a little embarrassedly. "I just felt that this kind of thing shouldn't bother you. I was going to do it myself. Otherwise, why would I assemble this computer myself? Stark Tower has all kinds of advanced computers. It can monitor Hell's Kitchen, let alone the entire Manhattan area," Peter said earnestly while typing rapidly on the keyboard. "I've realized that I really can't rely on others too much. When I listened to Matt talk about his experience fighting criminals, I thought it was really nothing special. It's just beating people up, right? How hard can it be? But when I put it into practice, I found that it was indeed very difficult. The difficulty was not in cutting a single thread, but in untangling a mess and then accurately finding the thread that would be fatal." Schiller applauded him and said, "Has anyone ever told you that you are really talented?" Peter seems to have been born to be a superhero. He is strong, kind, and, more importantly, has a cleverness that most people don't possess. Soon, the screen flashed blue, and Peter stopped pointing, saying, "It's done. Now I have to wait a few hours. As long as he sends any signals related to his identity within that time, I'll be able to catch him red-handed." "So what are you planning to do after that? Charge straight in?" Pikachu asked. No. Peter shook his head. "Actually, the captain told me a lot of tactics before, but I didn't really listen at the time. But when it came time to use them, I thought about it and found that many of them might be helpful." As he spoke, Peter pulled a map out of his bag, unfolded it, and pointed to a section, saying, "Look here. This is Hell's Kitchen. See these lines I drew? I found a map of the New York sewer system when it was built at an old newsstand, and I drew part of Hell's Kitchen on that map. As you can see, the sewers lead to most of the main buildings in Hell's Kitchen, and the exits are distributed very evenly. From point A at the southernmost end to point B at the northernmost end, the distance between each manhole cover you have to pass through is almost the same, showing a uniform ring distribution. This is a natural attack route. I just need to go in from here, see? This red dot I marked. At my running speed, it will only take me less than 5 minutes to appear near the innermost ring of buildings in Hell's Kitchen. The second ring will take about 10 minutes, and even the outermost buildings will only take less than 15 minutes. Once I get the signal, I can be in the building where the bullseye is located in no more than 15 minutes. Pikachu said, I guess he won't choose the closest or furthest circle, but will be in the middle part of Hell's Kitchen, just like us. That's what I think too. Although the core area is all Kingpin's property, Bullseye knows he'll be watched there, so he must have another base on the outskirts. It would be much easier to catch him there than to sneak into that place with a bunch of Kingpin thugs. Peter was indeed very talented with computers. In less than 20 minutes, not even a few hours had passed when the screen suddenly lit up again. Peter quickly started typing on the keyboard again. He stopped to look at it, then jumped up, grabbed his bag and ran out, shouting as he pushed open the door, "Keep an eye on things. Call me on the walkie-talkie if there's any noise." Pikachu gave him a reassuring gesture. Peter jumped into the nearest sewer entrance, and just as he expected, New York's sewers were incredibly interconnected. He ran while looking at the map and actually got there a few minutes faster than he anticipated. When Peter pushed open the manhole cover, he was on a main street south of Hell's Kitchen. Schiller's psychiatric clinic was to the north, quite a distance away, and Matt's cabin was several streets away as well. Bullseye was quite good at choosing locations. The signal came from a junkyard, a place rarely visited by people. But this place was incredibly friendly to Peter. The junkyard's undulating terrain, all sorts of trash that could be caught with spider silk and swung around as weapons, and several garbage trucks that could be used as cover to avoid hidden weapons. Although Peter didn't understand terrain tactics, he instinctively felt that this place would be very convenient for fighting. He crept silently along the edge of the junkyard. As he focused, his spider sense became more acute, and Peter even vaguely saw a three-dimensional map of the surrounding environment within a few meters in his mind. Behind the landfill, Peter clung to the wall and quickly climbed to the roof. He then hung upside down from a spiderweb and looked out the window. Bullseye was indeed inside, smoking and talking to one of his men. Peter's nose twitched. He smelled the stench of marijuana. Looking at the smoke-filled room, he retracted his web, took out a red and blue suit from his backpack, and muttered, "I forgot to ask Mr. Stark to give me a gas mask. This damn Hell's Kitchen." After donning the spider suit, Peter didn't hesitate. He swung on a web and smashed through the window. Bullseye's henchman, who was closer to the window, was kicked unconscious by Peter before he could even turn around. Bullseye threw away his cigarette, cursed, and then used his arm to block Peter's punch. If Peter were an ordinary person, Bullseye's movements would be very effective in achieving defense, but the power brought by the spider mutation, even if it has not been fully developed, is not something an ordinary person can withstand. After taking a punch from Peter, Bullseye was sent flying backward. But he lived up to his reputation as a master acrobat. With a twist of his waist in midair and a somersault, he landed smoothly. He ran quickly toward the back door, Peter following him, but the stench and lingering smoke in the room made him less sensitive. Then, with a click, the back door opened, and Peter rushed out, only to be met with 3 darts. Peter didn't dare to take the hit head-on, so he rolled to the side, then reached out and fired a web, which swung across the back door wall and landed in the junkyard, where Bullseye was standing on a small hill of garbage. Ha! Where did this greenhorn come from? Thinking he can cause trouble in Hell's Kitchen just because he's wearing weird clothes? Peter ignored him completely and kicked him as soon as he landed. When Steve was explaining tactics to Peter, Schiller was also there. He told Peter a very effective tactic. Villains always die from talking too much. As soon as the other party opens their mouth, just throw a punch and knock them down. There will be plenty of time for them to talk. Why talk about martial ethics with the villain? This tactic was clearly very effective. Before Bullseye could even finish speaking, he had to quickly roll to the side to dodge. Peter resisted the urge to speak and unleashed a flurry of punches. Bullseye was starting to feel the strain. He realized that the kid opposite him was incredibly strong. Even a slight glancing blow would hurt. When Peter punched Spider-Man, Spider-Man only swayed slightly, but when Spider-Man punched him, he flew through the air. If it weren't for Bullseye's good balance and flexibility, allowing him to land smoothly every time, he would have been caught and beaten to a pulp long ago. Seeing that things were going badly, Bullseye threw a dart. While Spider-Man was dodging to the side, Bullseye pulled a ball out of his pocket and threw it to the ground. After a slight hissing sound, a cloud of smoke spread out. This wasn't a smoke grenade to obscure vision, but a miniature tear gas canister. The extremely pungent smell almost suffocated Peter instantly. He covered his mouth and nose and coughed desperately twice. When he came to his senses, Bullseye was gone.